Most beginners get stuck right here, and that's financing. How do you fund your first storage deal? You might be thinking, my credit isn't great. I don't have the down payment. I don't have access to money or capital. And so a bank is not going to take me seriously. I don't have any experience. I've never done a storage deal before. Listen, I thought the same exact thing before buying my very first storage deal about 5 years ago. And here's the truth. Every single deal I have ever purchased has been financed and structured in a different way. None of them ever required me to come out of my own pocket for any of the cash. In other words, 100% of the purchase price and every single deal I bought has been funded and financed by somebody else. And so in this video and in this podcast, I want to just quickly preview small business administration, in other words, SBA financing, seller financing, private money, equity partners, working with small banks and institutions, and then just creative deal structure overall. Now, I think the one mindset shift that I want to encourage you to have is not viewing lenders as a gatekeeper, but actually viewing lenders as your partner, okay? Because you need to understand that lenders aren't trying to reject you. They're not out to get you. In fact, lenders want to finance and fund your storage deals. Why? Because that's how a bank gets paid, by lending money, right? Interest on the money they lend. And so they want to partner with you. They want the deal to work. They want you to be a success. And I think if you have that mindset shift, it starts to take some of the pressure off. And if you're somebody who feels intimidated by calling the loan department of a particular bank or reaching out to Live Oak or one of these mortgage brokers, then it'll take the pressure off. Because why? They want to work with you. They want to build the relationship. They lend because self-storage is one of the lowest defaulting of all the asset classes. Okay, when you think about all the properties that go up at auction and get foreclosed on, storage is one that is the lowest defaulting. That's because the operating expense ratio is a lot lower. That's because it's a very sticky product, meaning when somebody moves in, they tend to stay and pay for a long time. And there's several other reasons, but I want you to have the mindset that you want to shift from asking for money to offering an opportunity to participate. And that applies whether you're working with a private lender, a potential equity partner who's going to actually get some stake and ownership in the deal, or you're talking to a loan officer at a bank. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to share with you several personal case studies of how I've structured deals differently, all without having to use my own money. Now, I want you to understand that I truly believe storage can be one of the easiest asset classes to finance, particularly compared to single family residences. Why? Because when we're looking at a house, at a home, a single family residence, it's based on comparable sales. In other words, what we call comps. What have like properties sold for within a quarter mile or a half mile radius within the last 3 to 6 months? When we're evaluating a self-storage facility, we're not looking at comps. We are looking at the income the asset produces. That is what determines the overall value of the facility, which is incredible because as operators or as a first-time storage buyer, you get to go in and force appreciation, meaning by the value that you add to the facility, and that could be in the form of raising rents, that could be in the form of adding fee income like late fees, auction fees, 24/7 access fee, et cetera, that adds value to the facility, which makes it more valuable. Okay, why? Because the net operating income is going up. Now, I think it's important that you understand how banks view self-storage facilities and the funding of a storage facility. A bank is going to lend on the business, not just on your personal finances and your financial picture, so to speak. Now, they are going to look at that. That is a factor, but they're also going to lean heavily on the actual business, the performance of the business, where it's at, and where you can take it by showing them your business plan, by showing them the historical financials, by showing them your marketing plan and how you plan to raise the revenue, raise the net operating income, and ultimately increase the value of the facility so that it protects their investment, whatever they're going to loan to you. Now, there's a couple acronyms that I think are important for you to know. NOI, which I've already referred to, that's the net operating income of the business. How do you calculate the NOI? It's simply the revenue minus the expenses. In other words, expenses are the operating expenses. What does it take to operate that storage facility? And in storage, the operating expense ratio, depending on the size of the facility, depending on the market and a few other factors, can be anywhere from, let's just call it 35 to 40% on average, I would say, is a pretty safe. Can you operate at a lower expense ratio? I have some friends that are in the high 20s, low 30s, but I will never underwrite or evaluate an opportunity based on such a low operating expense ratio. I tend to default more to 35 to 40%. Why? Because if I know if I can make the numbers work at a 40% operating expense ratio, I can certainly make it work at 30% operating expense ratio. So NOI is important to know, and a bank is going to look at the current NOI and the potential NOI when you're able to paint a picture and show how you're going to get there. All right. It's not just talking about it, but it's actually showing a plan that makes sense. The other thing that I think is important for you to know is something called the debt service coverage ratio, DSCR. And this is a really, really important metric that a bank is going to look at. It basically tells the bank your ability to be able to pay the loan, the debt service. And if you had $100,000 of net operating income and you have $100,000 of debt service, meaning when you pay the monthly payment, you multiply that times 12. What is the total annual debt service? If you have $100,000 of NOI and $100,000 of debt service, then that means you have a DSCR of 1. Not good enough in most bank size. Banks are looking for 1.25 to 1.3 DSCR, or debt service coverage ratio. That means that if you're looking at a facility, for simple math, it needs to be generating, if you have $100,000 of annual debt service payments, that facility needs to be generating $125,000 to $130,000 or more in DSCR to come up with that NOI divided by the debt service. That will give you the, whether it's 1 or whether it's 1.2 or 1.3, whatever that math is. In fact, this can be an extremely valuable tool for you to go back to sellers and brokers you're working with that are looking for a certain price. And when you underwrite the deal and you run the math and you show them, hey, listen, I'd love to pay you X, but I'm in talks with this bank or I'm in talks with this lender and they're requiring a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio. Here are the numbers. Unfortunately, it's coming out at 0.9 or it's coming out at 1.1. And so as a result, this is what I can offer you. It can be a really powerful negotiating tool for you. Now, not only are they going to evaluate the performance of the business and what the business could do, they're also going to look at your personal situation. Okay, they're going to look at your credit. They're going to look at if you have a job, your W-2 status, how much money you're making. They're going to ask for 2 to 3 years worth of tax returns. Now, these things aren't deal killers in and of themselves. They are a piece of the pie, right? Or they're pieces of the puzzle. But if you lack in any of these areas, what you're able to do is partner with people that can bring that to the table. Maybe you can partner with a high income earner that is able to show this, and that will help offset the risk in the eyes of the bank. All right. Because ideally a bank is looking for a business that's strong, that shows that it can more than cover the DSCR, and a borrower who's strong on paper, strong financially, and is making money, so that if for whatever reason that deal goes south, then they're able to cover the debt service coverage ratio. That is what a bank is most concerned with, because let's be honest, a bank is not in the business of owning, managing, and operating real estate. They're not, especially self-storage. They're a lender. They want to lend money, collect interest, continue to lend money, and that's how they make money, right? A mentor of mine told me years ago, he goes, Alex, think about who owns the biggest buildings in any cities. And the answer is a bank. How does a bank make money? By lending money. So being a lender can be awesome. And if you're somebody that wants to get involved in storage and you have capital, it's a great way to get involved in deals by partnering with the right the right operator. In fact, so much so that we've had people within the Storage Wins community who have capital and they have funded down payments for other storage winners to buy their first deal. It's a great win-win-win all the way around. And look, this is one of the reasons that our unique triangle method includes one of the main 3 obstacles that people have that prevents them from buying their first storage facility is the fact that they either don't have money, they don't think they have good credit, they don't think they have access to money, they don't think a bank's going to take them seriously, and so they get stuck before they even start. And my core belief is that when you plug into our process and system and you find the right deal, money will show up. Now, I don't like to bank on that. I don't like to just wait until the last minute to try to get the right funding and financing. But it's been my experience that when you have a really, really good deal and you're very proactive and intentional about building relationships with people like we teach within our Storage Wins process, that you will have access to all the money that you ever need. In fact, it is my core belief that on this device right here, for you and for 99.999% of people, and especially for anybody that's listening to me or watching me right now, you have all the money you ever need in the contacts list right here. The question becomes, do you know how to have those conversations? Do you know how to present opportunities, how to drop breadcrumbs and plant seeds along the way? So let me go ahead and shift, and I want to share with you some various ways that you can fund and finance storage deals. I'll start with Small Business Administration, SBA, because my very first storage deal, a 43,000 square foot facility in Mississippi, was funded. I got 85% SBA financing. And then I needed what they call the capital injection, right? Which is a fancy way of saying, hey, dude, where's your down payment money coming from? Well, I needed 350 grand to get into my first deal. I didn't have 350 grand to get into my first deal, but I knew who did. Somebody who was a high income earner, had capital sitting on the sidelines, not earning much. It was just sitting in a savings account. He was intrigued by the possibility of putting that money into self-storage, an asset class he believed in. He trusted me. He knows me. We've built a relationship over time. And it was literally a couple of text messages and a phone call, and I had secured the money I needed in exchange for a portion of equity in the deal. So he put up the capital. He got some ownership in the deal. I was able to also borrow his balance sheet, which shows his assets and liabilities. And so that strengthened me as a buyer getting into my first deal. I was able to present a strong business plan, show why this business was a success from day one and why it would continue to be a success. I did a market study, competitor analysis, and checked all the boxes. And it ended up being a great deal. We bought that deal for 1.592, and we ended up selling that deal for 2.495 about 3 years later. So really, really strong deal. SBA can be a great way. You either have a 7A or a 504. And so there's storage mortgage brokers or that can actually go out and shop the best rate and terms for you. And that's something you want to do. Is you don't want to just hitch your wagon to the first bank or lender that you speak to, but you want to shop it. In fact, Mario, one of my Storage Wins coaching clients, when he bought his first facility several months ago, that's exactly what I had him do, is go out and call small banks. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But he was able to shop rates and get the best rate, got a really, really good interest rate, strong terms, amortized over 25 years. And so it was a really solid term loan sheet is what they call it. All right. So number one is SBA financing. Number two, I'll just roll right into it, is I always advise and recommend that, especially if you're in a small tertiary market, maybe even a secondary market, is find the small local banks, institutions, savings and loans, credit unions that maybe you've never even heard of, right? I'm talking about I'm not talking about Wells Fargo or Chase or Regions or anything like that. You're not going to them. You're going to the super small banks and institutions and start building a relationship with them, right? I always like to work with a bank that has funded storage before, but even if they haven't, I want to get on the phone with their loan department and I want to talk to them and I want to let them know, hey, here's what I have. Are you interested in partnering with us and being a lender on the deal? And so don't go to the big banks, go to the small banks, especially where the facility is located in, because they want to lend on a local business. They want to see their community growing and thriving. And so that can be a powerful way to get a deal funded. Number three is probably my favorite way, which is seller financing. And seller financing is nothing more than turning the seller into the bank. What's fantastic about seller financing is that you get to negotiate the rate and term. You can negotiate the interest rate. You can negotiate the term. In other words, how long is the loan for? Is it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? You get to negotiate the down payment. And so it's extremely, extremely powerful when you're able to connect with a seller that sees the value and the benefits of seller financing. when I bought our Florida facility with my partner, we got 90% seller financing, and we were in competition with another buyer. And we ended up getting that deal not only because I had built trust and rapport with the seller, but essentially I gave him what he was looking for. But because I gave him this price, I was able to negotiate my terms. So we put down 10%, which, by the way, I got from a private lender, and I'll talk about that next. And then he became the bank, and because he and his sister owned the property free and clear, they financed 90% of the purchase price for us, and we got a ridiculously low interest rate, 3.25 fixed interest rate. We got it amortized over 35 years instead of what's common in storage, which is 20 or 25 years. And what that did was reduce our debt service payments and increased our cash flow in the deal from day one. So it was a phenomenal deal. We ended up doing a 5-year term. Now, I will say that make sure that you understand the exit before you enter the deal. What do I mean by that? What is the plan? Are you going to refinance the property, pull some cash out, and keep it in 2 or 3 years? Or are you going to have to sell it? Like, what is the plan for you? And the longer of a term you're able to get and negotiate, the more flexibility it gives you in the deal. And you might ask yourself, like, hey, Alex, why would a seller agree to seller financing? And it's a great question. And there's a myriad of reasons why a seller would agree to it. But one of which is if their cost basis in the deal is very low because they've owned and operated that deal for a number of years. Maybe they bought it 20, 30 years ago and they don't owe anything on it, or they have a very low mortgage on it. Or maybe they built the facility and it was super, super cheap, and now they're going to see all these gains when they sell it. Well, Uncle Sam is going to come calling for their money. And so seller financing allows them to avoid the capital gains tax. It allows them to get a steady, reliable income stream without the headaches of owning the business, operating the business, worrying about taxes, insurance, maintenance, customers, rent raises, auctions. They don't have to worry about anything like that. In fact, the seller, the gentleman who sold us, which we built a great relationship with, still have a great relationship with him, he makes more money today passively every single month via ACH. We pay him. He makes more money today passively than he did owning and operating the business. So it was a true win-win all the way around. Seller financing can be one of the most powerful strategies if you understand how to structure the deal. And that's one of the things that we talk about at length inside of our Storage Wins community. I mentioned private money, and that's somebody who's got money either sitting in a self-directed account like a Roth IRA or in a savings account, and they're not necessarily happy with the interest or the money that's being earned on that money that's sitting on the sidelines. And so you're able to offer them either a first or a second position lien. There's insurance on the facility, and their money is backed by the asset. It's backed by the business. And so my third deal, I raised $1.45 million from 3 people that I have built a relationship with that knew and trust me. And they got a solid interest rate. They got everything that I promised them. They got paid off. And it allowed me to, once again, get into a deal without necessarily having to use any of my own money. But now understand that this probably doesn't happen overnight. You need to plant seeds with people, build relationships with them over time. And so you want to dig your well before you're thirsty. Super, super important, okay? And then you also have equity partners. And these are people that will put money to get a portion of ownership or equity in the deal. I've had several Storage Wins coaching clients do this and put money that they have into a deal to get some ownership in the deal. They didn't have to find the deal. They didn't have to, do all the heavy lifting to get it closed. They don't have to operate it. We have somebody within our community that this is his specialty. He's got a lot of self-directed money, and he deploys it by putting it into different people's deals. And he's built his self-directed account tax-free by investing in other people's deals. So believe me when I tell you, the money is out there, whether it's SBA or seller financing or small local banks, private money, equity partners. There's even bridge funding or financing, which can essentially help bridge the gap. Usually it's high interest, shorter terms. It's expensive money, but depending on your situation, maybe it makes sense to explore bridge financing. But Look, I want to now shift, and I want to talk to you about if you're somebody who has never bought a storage facility and you're concerned about the funding and the financing. It's super, super helpful. I want to share with you some practical things you can do today in order to position yourself to be able to get the financing and funding you need to buy your first storage facility. Number one is I want you to be neatly organized. So create a Google Drive folder or a Dropbox folder or on your desktop, on your laptop, and call this your lender package. And inside of that folder, I want you to be neatly organized. So I want you to have your last 3 years of personal tax returns saved in a folder that you call personal tax returns, or whatever you might want to call it that makes sense. Your personal financial statement. Think of this as your financial resume, your financial snapshot of the assets you have, the liabilities that you have, what's in your bank, like everything, like your personal financial statement. And you can simply jump on Google or ChatGPT and ask for a PFS or a personal financial statement template and get used to filling that out once a month. And so you have it readily available. And you, by the way, you should already know your personal financial situation anyway. So this is something I want to encourage you to have a folder for your PFS. A business plan, obviously, this is something you'll put together once you're evaluating a deal. In particular, if you're getting SBA financing or if you're working with a bank, I like to put together a business plan. It shows that you're a professional. It shows that you're prepared. It shows that you're a thoughtful borrower. It shows the plan of how you're going to take this business from where it is to where you project it to get to. I like to have in there my buyer info sheet, which is a resume on who I am, my experience. If you've bought real estate in the past, if you have leadership experience, management experience, business experience, put all that in there, okay, so that they get to know who you are personally and individually. And then obviously the financials on the actual deal, your underwriting, the competitor analysis, the market analysis, rent roll, the trailing 12 once you're under an LOI or under contract and you get that from the seller. So the point is that you don't need to have 19 binders or 27 different folders. You can have one clean folder that has all the essentials so that when you get your LOI accepted or you get your purchase and sale agreement signed, and then you reach out to lenders, you can just fire an email or send them a link and boom, you are neatly organized, you're professional. Think about the picture that paints in the eyes of the lender. It already gives you a leg up. It shows that you're somebody that they might want to partner with. Now, here are some of the biggest mistakes I think beginners can make with lenders is trying to look perfect instead of just being transparent. Trying to hide the rattlesnakes in the deal or where could the deal go south. In fact, I would tell you to go the opposite way, is put a spotlight on the challenges of the deal, but it's super important to be able to explain how you plan to mitigate those potential risks. What is your game plan, all right? Not asking questions because you're afraid of sounding inexperienced. Not being truthful and honest and lying about something that if they uncover later, they're going to put a big X on you. Not only are they going to kill the deal, but you potentially shoot yourself in the foot from ever working with that lender or bank again in the future. Not being responsive. If they ask you for something, take pride and have strong work ethic and being able to communicate clearly, concisely, and quickly. I remember when we went through the SBA process, we got that loan closed. I think it was 73 or 74 days. And we did it because every time SBA requested something, which was pretty often, they requested a lot, everything short of a blood sample. But every time they requested something, most of the time that same day or by the next morning, I had it to them. And it helped that I was organized. I communicated concisely, clearly, quickly. I made myself easy to work with, and people like that. And to the point that I built a great relationship with one of the top people at Live Oak, which is one of the biggest banks that lend on self-storage. So extremely important. Don't just think short-sighted, but remember that your experience with that lender is going to carry forward, and that can be a positive thing or a negative thing. Not leveraging, I think another mistake is not sharing your team and leveraging your team. So you know this, but if you're part of our exclusive Storage Wins community, you know what a big benefit it is when you share that with brokers and you share that with lenders. It shows that you take this business seriously, that you've invested in yourself, and that you have access to people that can help you, resources. A lender likes that. Okay, if you have broker relationships, or if you've paid for a feasibility study, which is an independent third party that is going to underwrite and analyze the deal and the market, anything like that, any resources you have, people that you work with, share that with them. Okay, that can be extremely important. So look, as we wrap this one up, I want to encourage you, if you got value out of this, number one, share this with somebody that you think could benefit from it. It helps grow the channel. It helps give me the ability to put out more content that can help you in your storage journey and in pursuit of your first or your next deal. And if you like this, then plug into the archive of trainings that we have here. So I want to encourage you to do that. And I really look forward to connecting with you on the next one. Speed of implementation. Take something you learned here and apply it in your business so that it can help you. And I look forward to continuing to be a part of the journey for you.